it's producer Mark at KCMO Talk Radio, and if you're an NFL or college football fan, check out my weekly sports betting podcasts. Search College Pick'em Program or Sunday Sharps wherever you get your podcasts, and hit that subscribe button for my weekly picks, including the Chiefs, Mizzou, Kansas, and K-State. Now here's the Monday in the Morning podcast.
I am convinced that Donald Trump's time on The Apprentice has prepared him for this moment in picking and staffing this cabinet that looks like it is going to be an absolute rock star of a cabinet that Donald Trump is putting together and clearly learning from his mistakes back in 2015. This is why when we were celebrating last week, I said this on Thursday, that for Donald Trump's sake, for his legacy, and arguably for the country, he is better off having these two terms in non-consecutive fashion versus being stuck in 2020 with some of the same losers he had around him back then, having to deal with a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate and getting nothing done over the last 4 years. Instead, now, he has learned from his mistakes, and we all make them, and he is putting together a very impressive list of people to be a part of this administration. So the names keep coming out. It really is like a television show. I see now that the most recent one I saw when I woke up this morning was Kristi Noem is expected to be the Homeland Security Secretary for Donald Trump. So this news keeps coming in. You had Marco Rubio named the Secretary of State. That was a bit of a surprise for me. I didn't know if Little Marco, as he was dubbed back in 2015, 2016 by Donald Trump, was in that inner circle enough to get one of the most prominent positions in the administration. But remember that Marco Rubio was supposedly on the VP shortlist. Now, I'm glad he went with J.D. Vance. Turned out to be the right pick in hindsight. But I just didn't know if Marco had the juice inside of Trump's orbit to get himself into that position as Secretary of State. But it looks like, of course, a lot of these have to be confirmed, but it looks like Marco Rubio is going to be the next Secretary of State under Donald Trump. And should we note as well that Marco Rubio would be the first Secretary of State of Latino descent? Should we, or do those first not matter when you are a Republican? Just like Susie Wiles is going to be the first female chief of staff in United States history. Okay. All right. I guess the first don't matter as much now, do they? Representative Mike Waltz out of Florida will be his national security advisor. Lee Zeldin, former representative from New York, will serve as the EPA administrator, second New Yorker to be selected to that cabinet. He was a close ally of Donald Trump's when he was in Congress. Elise Stefanik will be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. That was confirmed yesterday as well. So all these selections are taking place, and there's not one that I shake my head at right now. You've got Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, and then you also have Tom Homan, who is going to be the border czar. And I'm telling you right now, Tom Homan is one of these guys. If you haven't seen him, he just looks like a gruff border dude. He worked down there for a while. Since Trump got into office, he has been one of his close allies on cleaning up the border issue. And he actually spent the last few years just advocating for Donald Trump's border policies. He came on this show probably 2 or 3 times. When I would do those shows out of Washington, D.C. in the fall, he would come on usually once or twice. And this guy is no nonsense. He's the kind of guy that you don't want to screw with. So Tom Homan was put in charge of the border and will be put in charge of the border. And he was on Sean Hannity's show last night, and he said this.
Again, and we know what happens to these children, Sean. And look, the illegal aliens coming across the border, people need to understand, 31% of women that make that journey get raped by criminal cartels. Children get raped. I've talked to little girls as young as 9 that have been raped multiple times. These cartels are animals, and that's why President Trump's going to take them off the face of the earth. They've killed more Americans than every terrorist organization in the world. And President Trump is committed to calling them terrorist organization and using the full might of the United States Special Operations to take them out.
Now, that is graphic from Tom Homan. I don't want to be necessarily playing that on loop, but I do think it's important to note in the context of what we're talking about here. Tom Homan, along with Donald Trump, are vowing to punch back at a bunch of thug cartel members who do some of the most heinous things to people imaginable, including children, while also pouring fentanyl across our border that has killed well over 100,000 people over the last couple of years. And Tom Homan, if you watched any of the legacy media, I don't want to call him mainstream anymore. I dropped that moniker. It's really just legacy media. You would have thought that Tom Homan was the drug trafficker and the sex trafficker with the way they talked about him. No, this guy is going down there to do a job. This guy is no BS. He's no nonsense. And they are going to do multiple things to make not just the American citizen safer and the country safer here, but it will also work out better, unfortunately, for the thousands of people on a regular basis who are trying to get themselves to this country. Because of how treacherous and dangerous this journey can be for so many. So you saw the crocodile tears on some of the legacy media outlets yesterday, and they were talking about this guy, Tom Homan, like he's just the worst actor ever. And this bad apple who, oh, man, he's so gruff. Oh, he's going to ship people back and the whole thing. Well, the first thing they're going to do is make it so that the cartels are not in charge of the border. And that's what's happening right now. That's what's happened since Joe Biden and his incredibly weak policies came to be. The cartel is in charge, not the U.S. government, not the Mexican government. The cartel is in charge. And everybody knows that. So resetting that relationship at this point is going to be critically important to getting that border under control. And having guys like Tom Homan, who are no nonsense, no BS guys, to play a big role in getting that relationship reset is going to be incredibly important to getting that situation under control. You could not have had a better pick at the border than this guy, Tom Homan, is going to be. That's how good he is, and that's how much confidence I have in him, and I believe the American people are going to put in him as well. Because Donald Trump got a mandate on the border. That is not even up for debate. Kamala Harris lost this election for a multitude of reasons, but one of them, and one of the big issues for the Democratic Party, was their whistling past the graveyard on the immigration crisis. Not just about the bodies, not just about how people do not want to use their tax dollars to fund illegal immigrant services, but also because of the fentanyl that is impacting communities that are rural, suburban, and urban. There are too many examples. We talk a lot about Cooper Davis's story here in Kansas City, young man at Mill Valley High School who got poisoned by fentanyl. And his family has now built an incredible organization. We're involved with their annual 5K run that was this past June. And, you know, if they'll have us back, we'll do it again next year. But there are too many stories like Cooper Davis's. And now you have situations where you don't know what you're ingesting into your body anymore. You don't know what's laced with fentanyl. And that is because of these failed border policies. And that's not to say we want to go back to an era where people can just willy-nilly take drugs and not worry about it being laced with fentanyl. But you know what? It would be a step in the right direction. It would. Doesn't change my life. It's not my thing. But it would go and trend things in a positive direction for the country as a whole. So coming up, what was the response to some of these decisions yesterday by the administration? I will share that with you coming up here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We're always streaming this morning on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Good question by Mark and some of you on the text line. Now that Marco Rubio is likely to be the next Secretary of State, what happens from here? Well, Ron DeSantis, the governor, gets to appoint the next senator to replace Little Marco, although we can't call him Little Marco anymore. He's officially dropped the Little Marco moniker. since Trump's made him Secretary of State.
He's graduated to a higher degree.
Yes, maybe medium Marco. I don't know how he becomes big Marco, but either way, he'll probably take medium Marco. It's got a nice twist and sound to it anyway. Double M. They'll probably call him inside the West Wing. Hey, get Double M down here. So just like if, and there were rumblings that Missouri U.S. Senator Eric Schmidt was on the short list for Attorney General, Mike Parson or Mike Kehoe, depending on when it happened, would appoint the replacement for Eric Schmidt. But Missouri Senator Eric Schmidt said that he was not interested in being the Attorney General, and he removed himself from that short list yesterday. So that's how that's going to work. And as some of you are also noting on the text line this morning, you got to be careful with some of these appointments and make sure you get the right people in there. Example, Elise Stefanik, ambassador to the United Nations. She's a Republican from upstate New York. And now in that race, they'll have to do a runoff, and that can be dicey when you're a Republican in a blue state and you have the power of the incumbency and it's now gone. But I've got to believe that Trump's team is not going to pick people that are going to hurt his margins in the House of Representatives. I mean, that would just be so stupid, right? Because if somehow the House were to flip to Democrat because Trump took too many people out of the House and appointed them to various positions, that would go down as one of the most colossal political mistakes in modern American history, because then you get a Democrat House trying to do anything with Donald Trump. So I've got to believe they have internal data and polling that suggests taking Elise Stefanik out of the House and making her the ambassador to the United Nations, they are still more than capable of keeping that seat Republican. That's got to be what's going on here, because nothing else will make a lot of sense. So I do want to note this as well as we talk about Marco Rubio being the first Latino Secretary of State. Also, Donald Trump has made multiple appointments to Jewish Americans. Steve Witkoff, inaugural committee co-chair. Stephen Miller, deputy chief of staff for policy. Lee Zeldin, director of the EPA. Boy, this guy sucks at being a Nazi, doesn't he? My goodness, as of yesterday afternoon, nearly half of his appointments were to Jewish Americans. Terrible Nazi, awful Nazi, very bad Nazi, Donald Trump. Jeez, come on, man. What are you doing? You're not living up to being a Nazi like we were told you were going to be the second you got into office if you won. Terrible. Just a bad job. Awful Nazi. Now, the media reaction to Tom Homan. Well, let's start with Ana Navarro on The View. All right. This was her talking about Donald Trump hiring Tom Homan yesterday as border czar and how they're going to handle deportations, what that's going to look like. And she really doesn't understand the moment that we're in right now.
This is, a lot of people thought that when he talked about mass deportations, he wasn't being serious. I don't know how many times he had to say it for people to realize he was being serious. Well, if you thought he wasn't being serious, the appointment of Tom Homan today as border czar, and he will be in charge of a mass deportation program, the largest the country has ever seen, they say. And now Stephen Miller, as deputy chief of staff, should let you know that he was absolutely serious. And when you talk about mass deportations, people think, oh, it's just going to be the criminals. There's not enough criminals, aliens in the federal prison system for it to be mass deportations. What it means is grandmothers. What it means is brothers and aunts. Yep. What it means is abuelos y abuelas. It means dreamers. It means family members. It means your colleagues. It means your friends. It means people who are part of the society. And look, America, those of you who voted for Trump, this is what you wanted. This is what you voted for. You screwed around and you're about to find out.
Yeah, we are about to find out. We screwed around and we are about to find out, and I can't wait. I cannot freaking wait. Because for the last 4 years, we saw the entire world disrespect this country and disrespect our lack of borders. And come in and give the country a big middle finger and take our tax dollars in the process. So as Ana Navarro goes on television and worries about abuelos and abuelas, I don't worry about them unless they came into the country the last couple of years across the southern border illegally, while there are millions of people around the world trying to come to America the right way and live the American dream. So there's nothing to worry about unless you're somebody who, broke the law. In which case, yeah, you should be worried. Just like anyone else who breaks the law, you should be worried. But the notion that yesterday's news or this current week of news around who Donald Trump is appointing to certain positions is and I told you so from the left. Oh, we told you guys it was going to be like this. Well, yeah, there's 70 million Americans who are okay, and? I mean, yeah, yes. There was a mandate that was given by the American people last Tuesday. It was an indisputable mandate, a mandate that we haven't seen in a generation. With Donald Trump and the Republicans picking up the House, or keeping the House, picking up the Senate, getting the most electoral college votes since 1988. Yeah, I mean, I know exactly what I voted for. I believe most people do. And while you'll probably try to lie, just like you did for the 4 years he was in office, on what exactly is going on and what the plans are, and you will spend more time worrying about whether or not somebody who is going to be deported is now not going to be able to see their family than you are the thousands of Americans who are 6 feet under because of fentanyl poisonings and literally can never see their family again. I'm not going to lose any sweat over that. And neither should most people. I don't believe most people are going to be losing a lot of sleep over that. Because this is what America voted for. And it's not racist, as much as you're going to try to push that. Latinos voted for it. Black Americans voted for it. White Americans voted for it. Arab Americans voted for it. Asian Americans voted for it. Every single demographic shifted towards Donald Trump, with the vast majority knowing full well what they were voting for. So I'm just going to kick my feet up and enjoy the ride, and I hope that you'll do the same. Next on KCMO, on the text line, can Anna be the first one deported? I don't think that's possible. I'm pretty sure she's an American citizen, so hate to break that news to you on a Tuesday morning, but I do not believe that is possible. Although they do fabricate this whole idea that Trump's going to deport his enemies as well. It's no, he's not going to do that. Sorry. I know you have these weird fantasies, but that's not going to happen. I'll let the postmortems continue on a Tuesday. Good morning. Thanks for joining us on KCMO. Don't forget about Tirade Tuesday. It is one of our favorite segments of the week at 8:30. You can just get to rant on whatever's on your mind. So Nate Silver, one of the pollster gurus, put out a postmortem, and this was the most interesting part of it that I want to share with you. It was on the psychological profiles between Republicans and Democrats and how they respond to disagreement. And this analysis is consistent with public opinion data about speech and also social media behavior. So here's what Nate Silver, one of these polling data gurus, shared yesterday. He writes here about Republicans and Democrats that he got to perform a randomized control trial on how partisans in both camps reacted to good and bad news. He writes here, Republicans are generally happy when you agree with them partway or half the time. Admittedly, the sorts of Republicans who encounter our work may not be a representative sample, though you can find plenty of Trump supporters in the comments section of the Silver Bulletin. That's his newsletter. He said Democrats, however, often get angry with you when you only halfway agree with them. And I really think this difference in personality profiles tells you a little something about why Donald Trump won, wrote Nate Silver. He said Trump was happy to take on all comers, whereas with Democrats, disagreements on any hot-button topics, say COVID, school closures, Biden's age, will have you as a cast-out. He says that's not a good way to build a majority, and now Democrats no longer have one. So that is the perfect encapsulation of the profile right now between the right and the left. The right says they're the party of tolerance until you find some hole in their argument, and you might disagree with them on something, and then they call you a racist, a bigot, a misogynist, a sexist, a fascist, whatever, if you're not completely in lockstep with everything that they believe. On the other side, you've seen Donald Trump open his arms to people like RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, former Democrats who, when it comes to policy, do disagree with Donald Trump on plenty of things. But he built a coalition, a Big Ten coalition, and he did it largely through deal making and through seeing people for their strengths and their weaknesses, like Robert F. Kennedy. He's joked about it on the stage before. He said, hey, Robert, don't touch the liquid gold, as he calls it. Don't touch the liquid gold, Robert. You're not going near my liquid gold, referring to oil. But he says when it comes to making America healthy again, RFK can do great things on that front. And I hope that he does do great things on that front. Heard he talked about yesterday firing 600 people from the National Institute of Health. That's a good start. They've got 19,000 employees. I need a few more there, but it's a good start. But the broader point is most Republicans, and I would say this is true for me, this is anecdotally accurate in my life. When I talk to people, I talk to them for who they are. And if I find a Democrat who agrees with me on something, I lean into that. Right? I'm like, all right, that's great. We're making a step in the right direction. I love it. Let's get you that next step. I love this. This is going awesome. You found one thing you agree with me on. Let's double down on that. Let's find another. On the other side, though, if you are not entirely in lockstep with every angle of their agenda, if you're like, hey, if you're like 25 or you want to get transgender surgery, I don't think the government should stop you. I don't agree with you, but I don't think the government should necessarily stop you. But no, we should not be transitioning children. That should be illegal. We don't let kids drive cars. We don't let them smoke. We don't let them drink. We sure should give them absolutely no ability to make decisions like chopping off body parts. Well, you'll be called a transphobe by some people. That's what'll happen. Right? So that's the anecdotal difference in my life. And I'm sure there's plenty of you that can share very similar stories in your own lives at 913-408-7957. But when I saw this from Nate Silver, I was like, this is a perfect encapsulation of the differences right now between these two sides. And it is part of the reason that Donald Trump won. For all the promotion of joy and happiness that Kamala Harris had during the campaign, of course, then it went dark at the very end when she started struggling in the polling. There is not a lot of genuine joy there. When you think the other side of the country is filled with nothing but rubes that you add IST onto the end of, fascist, racist, misogynist, whatever, well, when you believe that, when that's something that you actually think is true, this is what you get. You get a side of the aisle that has such moral superiority in their own minds that they can't even fathom being friends with you. And that is part of a Gallup study that was done in the last few years as well that shows Republicans are far more likely to be friends with Democrats and to be willing to be friends with Democrats than Democrats are willing to be friends with Republicans. It's the same idea. It's the same mindset as this study from Nate Silver, where Republicans are like, great, if you agree with me on something, that's cool. We're halfway there. I love it. That's fantastic. Whereas Democrats are far more likely to get angry with you if you only halfway agree with them. The anger, the moral superiority, the holier-than-thou approach has been such an obnoxious turnoff for so many millions of Americans, myself included, for so long. And I'd like to think that there will be lessons learned. I'd like to think that they're going to do a little bit of self-reflecting. But we are a week removed from the election, and I am not seeing a lot of self-reflection going on. A little bit, but even those who are trying to self-reflect and are trying to call out their own side, they're the ones who are like, nope, you don't get it. You don't understand what's really going on here. And it's like, that's not how this works. That is not how this works. And in the meantime, as someone says here on the text line, the liberal tears are still tasting good. And yes, they are. They have some extra salt in them over the last week, I would say. Some of you asked for some clarity on something that our last guest, Matt Chateau of Betty Ray's Ice Cream, just said, and that was in reference to Mayor Lucas wanting a vacant land tax. So I saw that yesterday on social media, so I know what he's referring to, but the mayor put this up yesterday on X, writing, "It's time for Kansas City to evaluate a vacant land tax. Requiring voter approval, it would allow us to activate blighting vacant lots throughout the city that are neglected, often by resourced owners banking land, creating long-term harms for all, not by those lacking means." He writes here, "Any drive through our east side, Midtown, and increasingly South Kansas City shows a number of abandoned structures and vacant lots. Most are owned, and most could be put to a higher and better use almost immediately." So he wants to tax vacant lots to try to push development in these areas. You know what pushes development? People who think they can make money or make more money on said land. People who believe it's a great investment to build fill in the blank at such and such location. That could be commercial. That could be residential, multifamily, whatever it might be. He notes here that these lots are owned by resourced owners banking land. Well, people who have deep pockets typically like getting deeper pockets. I don't know somebody who has a deep pocket who's like, I'm good. I'm just going to sit on this empty land and just keep sitting on it, not do anything with it because, I like looking at empty lots in blighted parts of town. That's not usually how business owners think. But instead of incentivizing and saying, what are we going to do to really allow the free market to take off? Do you know how much red tape there is in this town when it comes to development? I have heard firsthand from developers in and around Kansas City who will not build in large part because of the green energy BS policies that were put into place by the city council in the last couple of years. So they're like, I'm not doing business there. It will take them a third of the time to get permitting in Overland Park and other parts of the metro versus Kansas City proper. Plus, their costs are higher in large part because of green energy nonsense. Has there been any thought to the idea that maybe an overburdened government is the reason, and high crime being a reason for too many empty lots? And instead of saying, well, the answer is to tax them more, to force somebody to develop it. Well, what about creating a more desirable climate and environment for business to then make it achievable and make it profitable for people to dump large sums of money into these currently vacant lots? What about that as an idea? But that might be thinking too much like a free market capitalist, and that's not a thing, unfortunately, for a lot of people in Kansas City, Missouri proper. Good thing it is for many Americans after Tuesday's results from last week. So now that we've got the election in the rearview mirror, I'm trying to find different things to pass my time during the day. And yesterday I saw this clip from Wheel of Fortune. I'm not a big Wheel of Fortune guy. I could DVR it, but I'm not in that Wheel of Fortune time of my life. It's just when you got 3 little kids, if you have time for Wheel of Fortune, something's wrong. And don't tell me you watch Wheel of Fortune, Mark. I don't even know when it's on in this town.
I haven't watched it for a long time.
Okay.
My
All right.
daughters might like it, though, now.
6:30? Is it a 6:30 show there, John?
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have time to watch it at
Yeah,
that
there's
time.
no time for
I would
Wheel
say
of Fortune.
no.
Last time I watched Wheel of Fortune was when I was in college living with my grandmother, and she was a big Jeopardy and the Wheel of Fortune fan.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd watch it then. And then we actually would sometimes watch that dope David Muir on ABC. What a mistake that was.
Oh, yeah.
That's when he was just kind of coming up the ranks as the pretty boy over there at ABC. When, what was her name? Not Barbara Walters. The ABC World News lady. I'm blanking on her name. Whatever. Anyway. You got
Katie Couric.
Nope. Diane
network.
Sawyer. There we go.
Yeah.
Diane Sawyer. So yesterday, this guy goes viral on Wheel of Fortune for all the wrong reasons. And it's always tough to explain Wheel of Fortune when you're not looking at the board, but I've got to play this because it's just too good here. All right? And Mark and I looked at this very early this morning. He got a kick out of it. So here we go. I'll play the clip and then I'll explain it on the back end.
I'd like to buy a U.
Well, you're going to get 3 U's.
I'd like to solve the puzzle.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
Treat yourself a round of sausage. No.
I'm sorry, that's not it. Over to Katina.
I would like to solve.
Okay.
Give yourself a round of applause.
Yeah, that's it. Although, Will, I kind of like yours better. That sounds better than just clapping right now.
Okay, treat yourself a round of sausage. What the heck was on this guy's mind? That's what I want to know.
And the last letter already had the A to start.
And
Applause.
the last word had an A to start. Correct.
He said sausage.
Treat is 5 letters. Give is 4 letters. So right out of the gates, he's totally wrong. What is treat yourself a round of sausage when the A is already available to you on the last word? See, if there is one of these jobs I could have, actually being the host of Wheel of Fortune, which is now done by Ryan Seacrest, and I don't know how this guy sleeps. I mean, he has every job in America. But that actually is a very underrated, fun job because your job is to smartly make fun of idiots. Like, that is the entire job. To cleverly and creatively, in a nice way, make fun of idiots to entertain smarter people. That's the entire gig. And you've got to do it on the spot. It's actually difficult. You've got to be very witty. And Sajak was very good at it. I haven't watched enough with Seacrest to know if he's any good at it. I just know this much. I would be having a field day with the treat yourself to a round of sausage guy. I mean, that is next level, man. Get this man around a sausage, would you please? He apparently needs it desperately. Where's the sausage man? Get him his sausage. So I went to bed last night thinking that Donald Trump had nailed every one of his cabinet picks that have been announced thus far. I mean, some of these need to be approved by the Senate, some don't. But either way, he is on a roll right now with these picks. Susie Wiles as chief of staff, Tom Homan as his border czar, Elise Stefanik as ambassador to the United Nations, Marco Rubio as secretary of state. Surprised me on that one, but still, good pick. Lee Zeldin, former representative from New York, will be the EPA administrator. A lot of New York and a lot of Florida is what you're noticing in the themes here, and that's not a surprise. Those are Donald Trump's 2 homes. He was a New York guy. Now he's a Florida resident. I mean, it doesn't bother me. Florida is now basically the home of the Republican Party. That is really Trump country, MAGA country. It was a swing state until 2 elections ago, and now it's as red could be, John.
You know, it's interesting as he goes through his choices. I think one thing he must consider is when those people leave their position, who fills the void?
Yeah,
right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I was thinking when I heard about Eric Schmidt.
Yes.
I thought, he might be better that he stays put here.
Yes. Now, like Marco Rubio, he will be replaced by Ron DeSantis' hand-selected choice to be in the Senate to finish out that term.
Yeah.
And that's how it would have gone here in Missouri. Eric Schmidt was on the short list for Attorney General, but he pulled himself off that short list yesterday. So he will not be the next Attorney General.
Right.
But every state does it differently depending on, what you are and what you're going to do for the Trump administration. The one that didn't make sense to me that came down overnight was Kristi Noem as Homeland Security. That I do not understand. I mean, that is a massive job. And to have her as Homeland Security Secretary when she has no experience for a role like this, no expertise, never worked in law enforcement, never worked for any of the agencies that she is going to be in charge of, and she has, as far as I can tell, no idea how these things are supposed to run, I don't get it. Like, it's an underratedly very important selection when you think about Homeland Security and what they oversee. You don't want somebody in that position who is learning on the job. That is the person whose work includes customs, border, and immigration enforcement, emergency response to natural and man-made disasters, anti-terrorism work, and cybersecurity. Kristi Noem has not done any of that. Kristi Noem's career is being a state lawmaker in South Dakota. She was in the state house for 4 years, and then she was in the U.S. House of Representatives, which is nice. And then, of course, she went back to be the governor of South Dakota. Her only experience that might somewhat tie into any of this is her time on the House Armed Services Committee. And even that's a major stretch when she was in Congress. Like, this is a really important role. It's arguably one of the most important roles. And I don't know what Kristi Noem has ever done outside of look good that prepares her for this. You're talking about anti-terrorism work and cybersecurity and the border. 3 incredibly important things to look at right now, especially in the wake of what's happened over the last 4 years, where you've seen 12 million people pour across the border, and dozens of them are on the terrorist watch list, figuring out where they are, using high-level technology, cybersecurity to figure out where they are, doing the anti-terrorism work. That is too important a role to put someone like Kristi Noem in that position. And, oh, by the way, she bragged about killing her dog. R.I.P. Cricket. So that's the only one I can criticize right now. The other ones, for the most part, have been absolute home runs. Tom Homan, the border czar, man, that guy has not taken any crap. I'll tell you that right now. We've had him on the show a couple of times, but if you missed Tom Homan, Donald Trump's new border czar, one of the most powerful things he ever said came at the RNC back in the summer. He was giving a speech to the crowd at the RNC, the Republican National Convention, and he just let it rip, man.
I got a message. As a guy who spent 34 years deporting illegal aliens, I got a message to the millions of illegal aliens that Joe Biden's releasing our country in violation of federal law. You better start packing now. You're damn right. Because you're going home. I got another message to the criminal cartels in Mexico. You smuggled enough fentanyl across this country to kill 148,000 young Americans. You have killed more Americans than every terrorist organization in the world combined. And that's when President Trump gets back in office. He's going to designate you a terrorist organization, and he's going to wipe you off the face of the earth. You're done. You're done.
Such a nice man.
There you go. That was Tom Homan at the Republican National Convention this summer. That guy is the new border czar for Donald Trump. I'd say he's not taking any crap. Would you agree with that assessment? I know that takes a high level of thought to come to that conclusion after hearing Tom Homan right there. This is such common sense. Having men and women in charge who are not going to treat drug cartels who are smuggling human beings and massive amounts of fentanyl into the country, killing American citizens with kid gloves, or turning a blind eye to what's happened along the southern border over the last 4 years. The cartels' glory days are over, and they end in January of 2025, and I am totally here for it. I am totally here for guys like Tom Homan taking over and saying to these cartels, we're in charge now. You guys had a nice little run with Joe Biden. You cleaned up. You had a great stretch there, but guess what? I hope you saved your money because we're coming in to kick your ass. Headline piece here. Let's talk about this with you in the 9 o'clock hour on KCMO. New York Times dropping this morning. The unspoken grief of never becoming a grandparent. A growing number of Americans are choosing not to have children. Their parents are grappling with what that means for them. I'm going to share some of the story with you and then opine on it as it goes along, because I do think that this is one of the many societal, social crises that we face as a country right now. We know that birth rates are at historic all-time lows. We know there's, and I'll get into this more, a big movement for people to just basically do whatever makes them happy in that moment, in that day, sacrificing anything for the long term, whether it's joy, pleasure, sleep, money, is not cool. It's not something that people want to do. It's just, I'm going to live today like it's my last, and then I'll do tomorrow the same way, right? I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do. No one's going to stop me. There's no point in thinking about tomorrow, whether it's kids or saving money or anything like that. And that's unfortunately, I think, in large part driven by culture, driven by social media, and driven by a lot of the other issues that we're facing societally as we roll through a 2024 that is about to turn to 2025. And it's not getting any better. I hope it can, but I'm not encouraged by some of the trends, and nobody should be. That being said, the article starts off here. Lydia Burke, 56, has held on to her favorite copy of this book since her 3 children, now in their 20s and 30s, were young. The Velveteen Rabbit. She loved being a stay-at-home mother and filled her family's home with books. She hoped one day to be a cool grandma who would share her favorite stories with a new generation. But none of her children want to have kids. And though that decision is, quote, right for them, end quote, Ms. Burke said, it still breaks her heart. She said, I don't have young children anymore, and now I'm not going to have grandchildren. So that part of my life is just over. Like Ms. Burke, a growing number of Gen Xers and baby boomers are facing the sometimes painful fact that they are never going to become grandparents. A little more than half of adults 50 and older had at least one grandchild in 2021, down from nearly 60% in 2014. So in 7 years, the number of people over the age of 50 who had at least one grandchild is down nearly 20%. That's a terrible trend. Amid falling birth rates, more U.S. adults say they're unlikely to ever have children for a variety of reasons. Chief among them, they just don't want to. Ms. Burke told the New York Times that is the best and worst thing about having kids. You watch them make their own decisions, different from your own. The New York Times writes here, still would-be grandparents like the Burkes may have experienced a deep sense of longing and loss when their children opt out of parenthood, even if they understand at an intellectual level that their children do not owe them a family legacy, said Claire Bidwell Smith, a therapist. Why do therapists always have 3 names? Claire Bidwell Smith, a therapist based in Los Angeles and the author of Conscious Grieving.
Looks good on the sheepskin.
You're right, it does. It doesn't help that our society tends to paint grandchildren as a reward for aging. Ms. Bidwell Smith said, quote, you always hear people talk about how great it is to be a grandparent, how it's better than being a parent. I think when people don't get to experience that, there's a very real grief that comes with it. Now, the New York Times gets to this part, and this is, I think, the crux of the problem here. Christine Coote, 69, had her only child at 42, after years of thinking she did not want to become a parent. The experience transformed her, she said, and she has loved being a mother. But her daughter is adamant she does not want children, pointing to her pessimism about the state of the world and climate change. This is not parody from the Babylon Bee. This is a headline piece in the New York Times. So we have this problem, and it seems like it's mostly among young liberal people who think that the world is going to explode sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. The ice caps will be melted. The mountains will be barren. The ocean is going to get us beachfront property in Johnson County by 2042. And what's the point in having kids? What's the point? The world's going to hell. That's where I do think it's your role as a parent to say, even if you believe that, what if your kid's the one who changes the world? Right?
That ought to appeal to their narcissism.
That's what I mean. Like, they're
You might have the
clearly...
next Sheldon Cooper.
The kids are narcissists. That's what they are, selfish narcissists. And to sit there and let them do that and let them make this kind of a mistake, and that's what it is. Now, I understand there are some people who are just not fit to be parents. Like, I genuinely understand that. But I do think that having children takes away some of that narcissism in you. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Suddenly you have little human beings who can't do anything without you. You have no choice. To whatever narcissism is left in your body has to go away, has to fall by the wayside, at least temporarily. And all your selfish wants and needs and desires, they don't all have to go away. Like, you still can have a life, but you have to temper those expectations, John.
Now, I'm trying to recall back in my day, it seemed like prime conception time was between like 11 p and 4 a in the morning, particularly on the weekends, right? High peak time. And at no point did science of, world global warming come up. So I'm kind of wondering how this lack of socialization with kids, I mean, things kind of just happen here for some of us.
Well,
and none of this, thought goes into it.
Well, exactly right. That's part of it too.
Yeah.
Right?
You just don't hang out.
You just want to be a parent. You want to build a family. And part of building a family is obviously finding yourself in a situation where you have children. And yeah, it's not always pleasant. I can think of an example. I mean, I don't need to tell you. If you're a parent, grandparent, or a parent, you've got plenty of examples of your own, right? I'm telling you right now, I have an example from 4.5 hours ago. I was waking up, heading out the door, little before 5. Our middle child was up 3 times last night, wanting to say hi, wanting mom to sleep in her bed. Dad couldn't help out. Dad wasn't allowed to do anything last night. It was just one of those nights. And then the youngest, who's 8 months old, decided she was going to wake up at 5 a.m. after mom had been in with the middle one for 3 times over a 4-hour period. So as I'm walking out the door, mom comes down, making a bottle for the little one. And let's just put it this way. I got a look. It wasn't about me. It wasn't anything I did. But I got a look that said, don't F with me right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm okay with it.
Yep.
It's part of life.
Got to read the room, right?
You got to read the room. All I said was, talk to you later. And went on my merry way. And that was it. Not actually merry, but you get the point. And we'll be laughing about it later today. I know we will be. We'll laugh about it tomorrow. We'll laugh about it in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years. But, that's what it does to you. It changes who you are as a human being and as a person. It does make you less selfish. It does make you reprioritize things in your life. And I do think that's valuable for young people to hear. Because we are in a world where anything we want, almost anything we want, is at our fingertips. And that has never been the case in human history. You can go on your phone, and in the next 5 minutes, you can buy whatever you want. In some cases, it can arrive at your front doorstep later today. Every single want that you have within reason, you can achieve in this moment in time. At no point in world history has that been the case. You stack that up with social media and a world that's all about you do you. You live your best life, man.
YOLO.
Yeah, YOLO. You only live once. Woo, yeah. The problem is this. These people, I guarantee you, are going to have regrets. At some point, when you're 30 or 25 or even 35 and doing that, it's fun, right? But then at some point, you're going to be 45, 50, 55, and you're going to say to yourself, what the hell did I just do? What is my legacy? And if you think your legacy is like your job or your Instagram profile, you're bleeping kidding yourself. Unless you're like a president of the United States, everybody else in large part gets forgotten. Even a lot of presidents do. That's why Bill O'Reilly wrote Confronting the Presidents, because there's 47 of them now, and most people can't tell you a lot, probably about 35 of them. Everyone gets forgotten. The only legacy any of us have are our kids. And this New York Times piece that is fluffing up young people and basically telling grandparents how to cope with the fact that they're never going to have grandchildren, to me, that's the wrong approach. And I'm going to explain more of why here coming up on KCMO.
Your legacy can be fleeting, right? Many people laid down a great legacy, and you get canceled.
Yeah, or that
on
happens.
top of all that. So
you build
to
something
your point,
over decades, and then
fleeting.
it's gone.
Yep.
That happens all the time. 913-408-7957. I will get to your calls on this piece that was front page of the New York Times this morning, headlined, "The Unspoken Grief of Never Becoming a Grandparent," and is part of a broader cultural trend that we're seeing. And the sooner it gets nipped in the bud, the better things can be for the country as a whole. We'll get into more of that coming up with you on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. You're missing the point on the text line. Pete, who cares about whether or not more liberal people end up having children? Who cares? That's on the text line at 913-408-7957. The story in the New York Times, "The Unspoken Grief of Never Becoming a Grandparent," and it talks about how a lot of people are not interested in becoming a parent. We know that birth rates are at historic lows. And this really focused on how grandparents or older people, as they're aging, are not having grandkids because of their own children's decisions and the impact that's having on them. Well, first off, when you have kids, when you actually build a traditional family structure, you are more likely, not guaranteed, trust me, we know plenty of places in our backyard that's not the case, but you're more likely to have a more traditional value set. It actually changes your worldview in many cases. Suddenly, you can't obsess over climate change when you have like a real life. When you live in the real world, when you don't have the privilege to care about climate change, suddenly you realize, one, it's not as bad as you thought it was, and two, there's not a lot you can do about it anyway. It just changes your priority list, right? So I think you're missing the broader point in terms of how we change and improve the culture. But there was one part of the story that also really stood out to me that I wanted to share with you, and I think it highlights one of the problems that we have relationally between boomers and Gen Xers and then their adult children. It says here, I want to make sure I get this part right. All right, here it is from Miss Coote, who is a 69-year-old parent of 3 who is not going to have any grandchildren. Her kids are saying no way, no how. Miss Coote, worry of making this mistake of talking too much to her kids about this, does not want to talk about the topic with her daughter very often. It's been made perfectly clear to me that the subject is not to be discussed, she said, though sometimes she cannot help herself. Miss Cutt tells her daughter that the woman she is 10 years from now will not recognize the person she is today and nudges her to keep her options open. That makes complete sense. And more of that should be done. Who you are at 22 is not who you are at 32 or 42 or 52. It's pretty much common sense. And to have the attitude at 22 of, I'm never having kids, so leave me alone. Well, things change. People want different things at different points in their life. I didn't want a kid at 22. It didn't mean I never wanted to be a parent. I just didn't want a kid at 22. But what you have too much of is people saying, oh, my kid's never wrong. Well, no, your kid can very much be wrong. And I don't think, well, you don't want to be a helicopter parent to a 22-year-old grown adult. I mean, they're an adult at that point. They're going to make their own decisions. you still can have influence over them. I have a buddy of mine, he's about 55. His son is married, and his son is probably 27, 28. And his son said to him recently, hey, we're never having kids. We got cats, we got dogs. And my buddy, who's in his mid-50s, asked him why. And he said, well, Dad, I think I'm too big of a selfish jerk. And he goes, my buddy, who's in his 50s, goes, you know what? That's a good self-assessment of yourself. And I said to him, I said, what a dumb conclusion to come to, no offense. Isn't the whole point of being a parent to take your own selfishness and put it by the side, at least for like 20 years? It makes you better. It makes you humbler. It makes you not be a jerk. I mean, if you're like, I'm a jerk, I can't be a father. If you could be a jerk to your own kids, then you really are the ultimate douchebag. I'm not sure what else to say about that. But if my child said that to me, I'd be like, well, all right, then you got to work on you, because that's a horrible reason for saying you don't want to have kids. But everybody is finding their own excuse for it right now. And it's very prevalent amongst certain demographics. It seems like it's most prevalent amongst white people who end up going to college than like working class individuals, which is fascinating to me as well, and also makes me wonder what the hell's going on at these colleges that make these kids come out of it and be like, you know what, don't need a kid. I'm just going to be a slave to the man, a slave to corporate America, and my legacy will be a watch in 35 years. You think that's the way to live? So you can buy random stuff on Amazon? I almost said something else. Mark had to dump me. Random, you know what, on Amazon? Like, what kind of life is that in the end? But you're seeing more and more of it. On the text line, Pete, I have 2 children that were not going to have kids. My daughter ended up getting pregnant twice, so I do have grandkids, and they are wonderful. My son did not have children. If my daughter did not have kids, I might have had to adopt a family. At least you know yourself there. Oh, my goodness. 913-408-7957. Pete, think about this. Even if they do have children, they're waiting until they're 35. If those children also wait until they're 35, we have to now eliminate grandparents from children's lives because in some cases they're just too old. Well, that's a good point. It stacks on top of itself, right? If you have a kid at 35 and your kid is a kid at 35, you're talking about being 70 potentially before you're a grandparent. And that is also part of the problem as well when it comes to trying to figure out what the heck's going on and how we change the topic here and get people on the right track, hopefully.